The Jarvencia would launch full-scale invasions of the stars' version of Earth on 2 separate occasions, in 1977 and in 2010. By the time of the 1977 invasion, the Jarvencia were at war with an alliance of species from multiple realities. At first, Avercia loved the challenge, but eventually the overwhelming opposition was enough to penetrate even his arrogance. He became determined to harvest the unique dimensional rips around the star's version of Earth to send his most devastating weapons that even he had been afraid to use in every universe, ripping them apart before their great powers could even react. The enemy universes had been too well guarded for him to get near enough to launch his weapons in a straight attack. Also, again, he wanted to make sure, given their nature, there was no chance of the weapons rebounding on him. The Jarvencia had already destroyed the Earth in multiple realities prior to the 77 invasion, and always enjoyed making this planet suffer more than any other, simply because it was the home planet of Jason, their most hated enemy. By this stage, Avercia was also able to leave his prison, and though he was still trapped in his flaming skull form, and would be forever, he had nevertheless come to embrace the fear this image struck into the hearts of his enemies. Under Aversia's guidance for Jarvencia, successfully invading the star's Earth by placing secret Jarvencia agents in numerous other realities that were connected to the star's Earth via the portals which they used to enter it. They did not invade at first, however, but instead operated in secret and used the Dimensional Rip's power to create a single portal straight to the Avercia reality, which allowed Avercia and his warriors to enter and devastate the star's Earth. Up to 30 million were killed in the invasion, which only lasted a few weeks, but in the end Jason was able, with the aid of the Void organization, to banish Avercia by taking control of the single portal Avercia had used to enter, which Jason used to banish Avercia to the very edge of creation, separating him from his vile horde for centuries. Without Avercia to guide them, the Jarvencia fell into a state of disarray and were driven back to their own reality by their enemies, who soon swarmed around the Earth, though this sadly was not the end of the war machines. They were taken over by a member of their kind known as Daccara, a member of the Supreme Order with a black casing. Despite his high rank, Jason, who had faced him many times before, had taken Daccara for nothing but a brute. Indeed, even Avercia had underestimated him somewhat, only granting Daccara his high position because he believed him to be one of the cruelest and most vicious of his soldiers. Whilst Daccara, even by Jarvencia standards, was unhinged and sadistic, underneath his brutal persona he was also scheming and ambitious, and had over the years amassed a large group of loyal followers, who, after Aversia's disappearance, helped Daccara depose Aversia's chosen replacement, Halco. Avercia naturally didn't think anyone could ever replace him, and only chose Halco to try and help him if he were lost. Halco, being nothing more than a mindless slave to his creator, was not equipped to deal with Daccara. It is believed that Daccara in life had been the last survivor of the Avercia universe, one of great chaos that almost rivaled Avercia, and that the Jarvencia had spent many centuries trying to conquer. Daccara, meanwhile, was their proudest warrior and turned as a statement of their supremacy. Unfortunately, however, due to the chaotic nature of their reality, Daccara not only became even more unstable, but was able to break free of Aversia's rigid conditioning as well. After assuming control, the upstart Daccara wanted to prove his superiority to their creator, and proceeded to use Aversia's most forbidden weapons to break through their enemies' defences. Several universes were destroyed in an instant. It was the single greatest disaster ever to befall the Alpha Omniverse. Both their enemies and the Jarvencia themselves were almost wiped out by this devastation, with the last scraps of the Avercia universe finally being consumed as well. Only a few hundred of billion of Jarvencia escaped the catastrophe, including Daccara and his elite, who would be forced to go on the run afterwards. Jason, meanwhile, was able to protect the star's universe, ironically with the help from the portals. He contacted numerous advanced species, including even survivors of the Yenka, across the universe to help him construct a machine that could draw magic from multiple universes, and though not in a way that would harm them, to create a force field around the edge of the star's universe to stop the effects of the Jarvencia's weapons from reaching it. Jason had tried to stop Daccara from launching the weapons, but failed, and was forced to watch it burn through the skies above before he escaped. He knew that the blast would take a while to reach the stars, and whilst he did warn other universes, they all to the last failed to stop it. Jason was taking a huge risk, letting magic from other realities cross paths with the stars, and indeed there would be many disastrous after effects. Still, the machine he and the other aliens, who temporarily put their differences aside, built, only barely managed to hold the effects of the weapon back from the star's universe, with the machine being kept in a castle at the very edge of the galaxy in the year 1978, where it was guarded by various alien species, including the Yenka. Daccara and his elite group of soldiers later discovered the location of the castle and briefly put the machine out of order, with Daccara wanting to burn the star's universe simply to spite Jason. Whilst Jason was able to restore the machine and chase Daccara and his soldiers away, in the brief time the energy of the weapons were able to enter the star's universe it destroyed millions of worlds. The blast finally burned itself out in the year 1982, with its effects also being a large part of why it took Jason so long to close the portals, as obviously he needed them open to draw power from the other universes. The longer the interdimensional rip remained, the weaker the walls between realities became, leading to another crisis in 1982, where a large part of the Earth was flooded when it collided with another reality. Daccara and the last of the Jarvencia, meanwhile, continued to flee across the multiverse, with the survivors of their enemies and numerous other races being determined to hunt them down. Jason later had more encounters with the monsters after returning to his interdimensional travels in 1984, following his closing of the Rips the previous year. One of the vampire's most notable encounters in this period was when the Jarvencia enslaved the living planet named Yastara, who came from one of Jason's favourite realities, the Daccara reality. In this universe, the planets were alive and could fly through space. These worlds were also capable of reshaping their own landscape's atmosphere and creating life in any way they wanted. Much like humans, the living planets could be both good and evil, with some worlds creating sentient life and looking after them, whilst others would use their life forms for their own selfish purposes. Yastara sadly was cruel and selfish and enjoyed creating warrior races to attack and invade other worlds. He'd never destroy the worlds himself, as he viewed that as murder, but he did not view the life forms created on each planet as anything more than toys, and even laughed and sneered at worlds who became too attached to the life within them. He thought of the invasions from his warriors as simple games with his friends, and never even contemplated how heartbroken the other worlds could be when civilizations they'd spent centuries building were destroyed. To be fair, he was not the only planet to have this attitude, but by far the most destructive. Eventually, one planet that never got over the loss of one civilization poisoned Yastara. It was the first ever incident of one planet attempting to kill another in this universe in over 1 billion years. The planets of the Daccara reality could control the fabric of their universe around them like no other species, with the rival planet creating a weapon that literally ate Yastara alive from the inside. No other world was willing to help him, even those who enjoyed playing similar games, as they found him to be a cheat, and so he departed to other universes to try and find a cure. This eventually led to the last of the Jarvencia finding him with Daccara easily conquering Yastara in his weakened state, as well as the last of its warriors, humanoid creatures that Yastara found to be among the most effective. The Jarvencia placed Yastara completely under their control and cure his condition. The Jarvencia used Yastara's resources to create the perfect conditions to rebuild their race, with more humanoids being created who could be turned into Jarvencia foot soldiers, though not all of the humanoids were turned. Those who were deemed unworthy were simply kept as an expendable slave race and foot soldiers in other invasions. With his new army, Daccara soon returned to the Stars universe to enact his revenge on Jason. The planet Yastara suddenly appeared in Earth's solar system in the year 1986, which caused great alarm on the Earth. Many ships were sent to explore it, but, of course, all vanished. From here, the Jarvencia would affect the Earth with various curses that led to a year of great suffering on the planet. Daccara was only attacking the Earth to make Jason suffer and could have easily destroyed the planet, but wanted to prolong its suffering and also to draw Jason out. Sure enough, Jason returned, and working with his old ally Annette, he was able to trace the source of the curse. In the resulting battle, he freed Yastara from Jarvencia's rule. The new army of Jarvencia were forced to flee. Sadly, Annette was killed in stopping the monsters, with humanity never learning why this strange world had temporarily visited their universe. Yastara would go on to become a major enemy of Jason too, as when he returned to his universe, he was eager for revenge against his people, and now aided with samples of the Jarvencia's dark magics left over, he actively poisoned his own reality, causing the deaths of billions of his own people before Jason stopped him, leading to their feud. Jason also continued to battle with scattered Jarvencian groups around the multiverse for years after, though Daccara's remained the largest, and later launched an attack against Jason's home universe. During this invasion, the monsters were able to trigger a chain reaction among several stars, causing them to not only go supernova, but merge into a singular black hole that swallowed dozens of galaxies. Trillions of lives were lost, entire species were wiped from existence in the 7th universe before Jason, using magic from another reality, was able to stabilize the weapon's effects, though the Daccara's actions still ultimately halved the lifespan of the universe at least. Jason was subsequently arrested by his own people and tried as a traitor. The people of the 7th universe were angry with Jason for not only abandoning them, but they also believed that his actions in exploring the multiverse had brought them to the attention of the Jarvencia in the first place. In many ways they were right, though in all fairness, had Jason not sent back the cyborgs, they would have reached their universe soon enough. Jason was ultimately saved from vaporization by his own wayward daughter, Mona, who was forced by her own universe to leave for her betrayal and joined her father on his travels. She and her father had not spoken for years, though they had reunited after his travels began once before to defeat the Deadrits, and that reunion was far from warm or compassionate. However, Mona still felt that it was a terrible injustice that he was being sentenced when he saved their reality. In spite of the fact that she saved his life, Jason and Mona's journeys were still awkward, with both clashing over her more ruthless methods. Things were further complicated when they took a former servant of the Jarvencia, Materia. He was a native of Yastara, having been created by the planet just before the Jarvencia invaded. He was spared only to be used as a slave and a lackey by the cyborgs. Unlike many of the other surviving humanoid soldiers of the Yastara who had been reconditioned to be loyal to the Jarvencia, Matera was young and easily groomed by them into believing their cause. He took part in the Jarvencia attack against Earth, where Annette lost her life, though he was not involved directly in her death. Matera did still leave one of the many curses on Earth during the invasion, which cost many innocent people their lives before Jason stopped it. After the Jarvencia were defeated, Matera and a handful of his men were left on Earth. They struggled for a few years after and turned to petty crime to survive, before the others eventually turned on and cast Matera out. Following this, Matera was taken in by a homeless shelter where he fell in love with one of the volunteers named April, who showed him a kindness and actually valued his life, unlike either of his people, his world, or his supposed masters. She did not feel the same way about him, however, but she still considered him one of her best friends, and she, knowing nothing of his past, believed he was a good man. His former men, meanwhile, would attempt to utilize some of the surviving Jarvencia's dark magics that were scattered around the Earth after the invasion, and that they could sense more than other life forms due to their time among the robots. Matera had not even attempted to look for them, as he did not believe they had the right without the Jarvencia's permission. But as the others struggled, they turned their backs on their masters. After seeing the Jarvencia for what they were when he lived with April, Matera refused to look for them for April's sake. His former men's attempts to use these very powerful and unpredictable dark magics caused them to nearly spread out and consume the city of Valkov. Jason and Mona soon arrived and diffused the dark magics with help from Matera, who, having been moved by his life with April, wanted to save Valkov, which he recognized on the news as suffering from Jarvencia magic. April accompanied him on the mission despite his protests, and even though she learned the truth about his past, she still did not judge him and believed he was a victim of the Jarvencia too. Tragically, she was killed when the town was briefly overrun, and Matera wanted to honour her after by protecting the people of Earth. He'd spend another few months travelling the world, battling monsters and evil wherever he could, but his clumsy, violent methods often made the problems worse. When he met Jason and Mona again to deal with another crisis, Mona invited him to live on the balloon. Jason wasn't entirely happy about this. He did not forgive Matera for the indirect role he had played in Annette's death. Still, Jason did acknowledge that both he and Mona were being given a chance for redemption. It was only fair that Matera be given a chance as well. The vampire also felt that it would probably be safer to have Matera with them than let him loose on the streets. Matera and Mona continued to travel with Jason for many years after, and though Jason and Mona were able to finally achieve some kind of reconciliation, he and Matera's relationship was always somewhat difficult. Matera and Mona, however, would eventually fall in love, which just made things more awkward for the trio. Still, Jason at the very least came to see Matera had changed when he faced his former masters, the Jarvencia, and bravely stood against them, even being willing to give his life to save Mona. Not long after, Matera died when facing another enemy of Jason's, the Synth Arch, who we shall explore in the next article. Once again, he sacrificed himself to save Mona and her father, and endured an absolutely horrific death at the Synth Arch hands. Jason did mourn his passing in spite of their differences, even feeling after seeing his final sacrifice against the Synth Arch that he had truly misjudged Matera. Mona subsequently left Jason not long after to help an alternative version of the Earth. She did not leave on bad terms with Jason, with the two having fully reconciled, and Jason later visiting Mona and her adopted daughter on this Earth many times, including to stop an invasion from Daccara, who again targeted this world for revenge. This petty act proved to be a mistake for the former tyrant, as his forces by this stage were weak and almost wiped out in the conflict, forcing him to go into hiding. Meanwhile, most of the other Jarvencia factions were wiped out by Jason and their other enemies over the coming years, or they killed each other off. Civil wars were common, as the different members of the Supreme Ones each thought they had the right to rule. Without Avercia to constantly update their programming, the Jarvencia came to think for themselves for the first time, though many still worshipped him as a god. The creatures also did not lose their anger, as all Avercia did when updating their programming was ensure their loyalty to him. He had to, as the magics that fused the souls of machines were so dark and brutal they would override brainwashing. Daccara had been able to repeat the process when he took over, which was something he naturally kept to himself after killing the rest of Aversia's elite guard, as well as wiping the knowledge from the Jarvencia databanks. As a result, the scattered groups often degenerated into barbarians, killing with no rhyme or reason, though a few were able to channel their anger into more of a purpose, such as power for themselves or worship of Avercia. Ultimately, these scattered groups didn't last long due to their chaotic nature. Then there were the Davenka's Jarvencian slaves. Davenka had come from a universe that had been devastated by the weapon Daccara had unleashed. This reality was in fact the Jarvencia's main adversary, with Davenka being one of their lead scientists. He was rescued from the destruction of his universe by Jason, and subsequently became obsessed with the Jarvencia, and despite his grief at losing his people and his world, he came to admire them. The fact that they contained such power was something he wished to emulate, and so after stealing several old dead Jarvencia casings, he began experimenting in the hopes of recapturing the process. It took him many centuries, with Davenka prolonging his life through magic. Davenka hoped his Jarvencia soldiers would be a force for good in the Omniverse, and they would destroy many great forces for evil in several realities. Jason even worked with them in one instance to his surprise and disgust. Sadly, however, like Avercia before him, Davenka became corrupted by power, and though his forces did not rain quite such destruction upon the multiverse as Aversia's forces, they were still tyrants to the worlds they ruled over, and were more than willing to destroy planets, even galaxies, for what they believed was the greater good. Jason fought them many times, though again, even at their worst, he would still occasionally ally with Davenka's Jarvencia against the other factions, who Davenka's sought to exterminate from existence. Still, this faction eventually came to despise Jason just as much when he was forced to kill Davenka in battle. A few of the surviving factions of original Jarvencia were later gathered together via Avercia. Everyone believed he was killed in the previous Earth invasion, including Jason, but instead the twisted former ruler of the Jarvencia slowly rebuilt his army, whilst preparing for the ultimate destruction of the Alpha Omniverse.